Okay, everybody. All right. So it's been an absolutely fantastic day. The last presentation before the break and before the expo starts at 7:15 is actually Joel DeRoss, who has been the integral part of bringing all this together. So he's going to talk about the events industry as a whole and his findings. So over to you, Joel.
Thank you. So really appreciate everybody coming out today. It has been a long day, but really what I want to unpack a little bit is this theme of economic development through event industry innovation and what that means. And I'll just start with a little bit of background about myself. Okay, so I've been in the music and events industry for over 10 years, and I've also spent quite a bit of time in the immersive tech space, understanding what the application of that technology is within the music and events industry. I've founded two things. One is a community organisation called Future Music Industry Network, which is focused on educating the music and events industry on emerging technology. And then the other one is Metavents, which is a event planning simulator. So my mission is quite simple. I just want to create positive impact through events. And so the three key issues that the event industry needs to address is planning and risk, and we talked about that a little bit earlier on the panel. Revenue streams and cash flow, and the other one is to educate an industry that typically doesn't invest much in innovation. They don't have the bandwidth for it. They don't understand its relevance. So the event industry is quite archaic in the way that it conducts itself. So it's not as simple as creating a technology solution for the event industry. You really need to be able to educate and expose people to what's on the horizon and allow them to feel it, touch it, and contextualize it. So as a result of addressing those key issues, I'm going to talk about how events that have fixed that will go on to create significant economic impact locally and globally, as well as how that would influence the way that we design cities and communities in the future, and how that will sustain humanity in our environment long into the future. So the first thing that we need to do is really change our attitude to what an event is. A lot of, whether you're a punter or whether you're the council that is issuing the permit, a festival is very much just a form of entertainment, and we're not really able to see past that. And as punters, we're not quite aware of just what it is that we're participating in when we're attending a festival, and the sort of immense amount of work and risk that is put on the line to bring these festivals together. It's not just about getting loose on the weekend. It could be so much more. So events of all kinds are just an incredible vehicle for change. Whether it's a small meetup, whether it's a conference or a festival, they all are able to create significant impact. And one of the things that I've been working towards for several years is how to measure that and how to accelerate the types of change and impacts that events can create. And I'll just take you back to 1999, 2000, Earthcore, which is what inspired me to head into this direction. It was at Lake Eildon. There was just the perfect music playing. It was outdoors, and that changed my direction for the rest of my life. I essentially wanted to do festivals. I wanted to play music, and I wanted to create these amazing experiences for people. But one of the things that I came to understand was that events are incredibly difficult to do, in particular festivals. So when you're at some of these festivals, you would have no idea in a sea of packed people that festival is actually maybe a few thousand people short of breaking even. Most punters can't understand the level of financial risk that is on the table, and Soundwave is a great example of one that's spectacularly taken a massive loss. And these are three other examples. So Future Music, Big Day Out, Soundwave, just between those three festivals accumulated about $50 million worth of debt within a really small amount of time. And that's money that didn't go into the event industry ecosystem. That's artists not being paid. That's, that's suppliers not being paid. And that's a lot of money to take out of the the small business sector within there, essentially. And we've started to look at how many events have actually been cancelled over the last, since 2012, whether they'd been postponed or whether they'd been cancelled as a result of the, poor permit applications, or whether that was as a result of bad weather. Just trying to identify, how many events aren't actually being successful, why, and what is the economic cost of an event not going ahead. And we've identified about 40 festivals across Australia since 2012 that have not gone ahead or been postponed, and that's translated into an estimated about $100 million loss to the event ecosystem. And where things really changed for me is when I got involved with Maitreya Festival. I was essentially a fly on the wall, where they permitted me to get right involved with that festival and watch how the stakeholder meetings unfolded, how the production was executed. And for about a year and a half, I was able to gain an incredible amount of insight into how this particular festival operated, not realising that it was actually going to turn into quite a big disaster when their permit was denied very shortly, before the festival. And as a consequence, the projected $2.5 million of tourism that would have gone into that Charlton community just evaporated. And the consequences of that are quite significant, because when you're projecting this many people to be injected into your community as a small business, you've got to buy a whole bunch of extra stock, and a lot of that stuff is perishable. So when the festival wasn't able to come in, all of a sudden you had a bunch of businesses that had spent tens of thousands of dollars on food, and now there's nobody to eat it. So I think several businesses really struggled. Some may have gone under as a result of that. So when a festival is cancelled, it has serious implications for that host city. And the other type of risk that is really prominent within festivals is the physical risk. We're all going out, and we're often partying quite hard, and we're exposed to really extreme weather conditions. And if the planning isn't done right, you can really find yourself in some serious trouble if, in the case of the Falls Festival, there was a mass crush of people exiting one particular stage, and about 60 people were hospitalised as a result. And these are just some examples of the problems within festivals having existed for an incredibly long time. Woodstock, their permit was initially denied, and they had to move to a backup venue, which was the now famous dairy farm where 500,000 people rocked up. And 500,000 people were stuck in traffic, apparently. So they just abandoned their cars and walked the rest of the way. Helicopters had to be used to fly in every single artist. There was a torrential storm which unearthed buried power cables which could have electrocuted tens of thousands of people. The National Guard was nearly called. Everybody was tripping on acid and having to deal with all this crazy stuff. But they lost $9 million as a result of that event, because 30,000 people rocked up too early. They weren't able to set up the gating, the gates to ticket people, and they had to make a decision. Do we make this a safe event, or do we try and make our money off this event? And they chose to make it safe and just made it a free event. So the 30,000 people that were there got on the phone and told the rest of America that Woodstock is now free, and then everybody converged on that. And so more recently, there's the Fire Festival, which is just the perfect example of how costly inexperience can be. And this is a big problem within the event industry, is not too many people actually have event management experience, nor do they have business experience, accounting, they don't understand logistics. So there's a lot of things that are missing from the skill set of a lot of event producers. And as a consequence of this, some inexperienced people with too much money created one of the most spectacular festival planning disasters ever. And it turned very much into a disaster relief situation where everybody was stranded on an island in the Bahamas. And they actually had disaster relief tents as their accommodation, and which is really interesting because I'll touch on this a little bit later. But one of the things that I've always compared festivals to is it's very much, if you remove the music, planning a festival is no different to planning a refugee, responding to a refugee crisis or an urban development project. So this is something that I really am interested in, the multiple applications of festival planning skill sets. But ultimately, what I'm trying to do is make events much easier to plan and to create new revenue streams by leveraging emerging technology. And the consequence of that is Metavents. So Metavents is the festival simulation platform that we've been developing. It's in its very early stages now, and we're just starting to partner up with regional councils and festivals to actually pilot it. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background as to where this came about. I wanted to create a festival planning solution that was more like a video game, where I looked at something like SimCity, and it just made complete sense that each object could have costs associated with it. It could come from a real supplier, and you could drag and drop meaningful structures into an actual venue, and all of that would make sense. Like the budgets would be calculated every time you made a decision. You would be able to, view the risks associated with how you set that event up really well. And this was the origin of where Metavents came from, where I felt that it is actually possible to plan something as complex as the Olympic Games on a mobile device. And that's what I wanted to do. So I went and got some work experience at a software company just to see how all that worked. And I'm going to take you through some of the key features of Metavents as a planning tool that differentiate it from others. And the first thing is it's like a dating website. So procuring the right suppliers and everything that you need for a festival can take a really, really long time. It can be really difficult, but this works more like a dating website where you just describe the type of event that you're planning to do, whether it's a meetup or a conference or a world tour, and every feature in Metavents after that is calibrated to the type of event that you're trying to plan. So it'll be as complex in features or as simple in features as your event requires. So being able to use description tags allows you to drill really deeply into the type of culture or the art or the music that your event would typically comprise of, and there's a matching quality status that tells you, have you given the platform enough information for an algorithm to match you with everything that you need in order to execute that event. So then you're essentially recommended the best, most viable ticket pricing based on the estimated cost of your type of event. And it's always going to give you, great advice on, what will actually give you a profit in the end of it, and what will allow you to have some money left over to invest back into your business. Because the way that events are at the moment, we've sort of maxed out the what we can actually price tickets at, because the public just can't afford to go much higher, but costs are still rising for events. So those costs still need to keep coming up, but the market has sort of reached its threshold as to what it can afford. And so we need to come up with really intelligent ways of doing ticketing, and the software is actually going to recommend a lot of those best practices around ticketing. And the other thing is going to have a sponsorship algorithm as well. So based on the type of event that you're trying to do, it's going to know what are the best types of sponsors or funding opportunities that you can access in order to help you execute your event, which is going to be really important as well. And the other thing is just a smart procurement of human resources. So based on the type of event that I wanted to do, it's automatically going to know the types of skill sets that I'm going to need, and it's going to recommend the types of managers and all of the people that would work underneath them. And it's automatically going to notify those people that an event is being planned, and they can either say, yes, I'm in, or no, I'm not. But it just automates getting that team on board, but it's also saying how many people you actually need to comply with safety. And this is where it gives you a bit of a summary. So based on your type of event, you're going to need X amount of security, first aid, volunteers, core team, police, and then it's going to give you a bit of a rough estimate as to what you can expect to pay. Once you've gone through that process, then you are given a venue database, and on the left there, you'll see that it has a risk profile. So that's telling you, based on when you have planned that event, what is the chance of wind, fire, flood, and it's also going to tell you how far the nearest hospital is, what the access to that venue is like. It's also going to have an incidents report log. So every time an event is held on a venue, that information as to what incidents actually occurred, how they were mitigated, is transferred to the next event organiser, protecting the identity of the events that actually use that venue. It's just that incident data. Because if that data is shared, it means that every time an event is done on that venue, it actually gets safer, which is really, really important for being able to effectively do risk management plans, because ultimately the more events that are done, the safer they get, the easier it is to plan for the risk. You would also be able to use VR in this component where you can do a remote site inspection. So if you're wanting to do a festival in a different state or on the other side of the world, you can just put on your headset and actually go and inspect that venue with all your stakeholders as well and your crew. Now, this is more of a mock-up, but this is the heart of what Metavents is. It's a visual planning tool which begins with a very traditional 2D sitemap where you can drag and drop geometric objects that represent certain things like a stage or toilets or fences. And as you're populating that sitemap with this information, you're able to create layers of information, because not every person needs the same information. You can filter that down so that just the people that need to know where electricity is going to be can have that map, and the people that are coming to, set up water or manage waste, they can have different types of site maps that just strip away all the unnecessary information, and they're able to get exactly what they need. The other thing is integrating chat. So we all use, Facebook Messenger and Slack and things like that. This allows for that real-time communication to happen in a form factor that we're all really familiar with. And down the bottom here, this is where you can actually set or view all of the deliverables associated with a particular area. If you're thinking about a festival like Glastonbury, where it's like over the space of a whole suburb and you've got 80 stages and you've got 200,000 people, and the only form of sort of communication is a walkie-talkie, it can be really difficult to track and manage everything that needs to happen at that event really efficiently. So these just allow you to create quick, almost like a hot link. So if you need to quickly dart to the main stage and see the information there, the risk profile of that, the budget of that, the volunteers there, all of the deliverables that are associated with that particular stage, you can configure that all in here at the very earliest planning stage. The next step is to visualize that in 3D. So whatever you've designed in 2D, you can just hit a button and then it'll extrude everything and turn that into a 3D environment. This is where you can actually use VR if you want to. If you need that spatial awareness, you need to get on site and see everything as it is. But essentially, this is what we call a placeholder. It just represents that a stage is going to go here, like a default object. And when you interact with those objects, you're actually connecting to a supplier database. So if I need a PA system or I need a stage, then when I click on that object, I'm actually being matched with all of the suppliers that are the best fit for my event, and I can engage them directly through the platform, and I can get quotes, and I can manage that whole relationship all through here. But the important thing is that those suppliers actually get a link to your simulation, and they're able to see whether or not they actually want to do it or not, or whether they can tweak their prices at all. And this is where we've really taken our insights from dealing with council, because the council really want to be able to identify events that are a fit for their community, and we need to build an interface where event promoters and event producers can work together with council around aligned interests. And this is essentially a festival marketplace where a council can shop for a particular type of event based on how many people they typically get, the growth rate of that event, what their core demographic is, and it'll even match the core tourism assets of that host town to the demographic of that festival. So they know that if they get this festival, then the local businesses are going to benefit in a particular way because there's a match between the different users and the assets. So I just want to quickly touch on event archiving because that's what this event is. This is all about trying to measure the impact of events. And so we're going to model this entire venue as a 3D experience, and all of the content that is produced, whether it's photos, it's videos, it's it's the stories of the people that have networked here today and how they actually have gone on to work together for the foreseeable future. It's bringing all of that data, all of that information, and depositing it within this this capture of a moment in time. And why that is important is because this is where we can create new revenue streams. So Maitreya, their festival permitted them to have about 10,000 people on the site, but they've, and we know that that would have injected about $2.5 million into the economy. But they also have 44,000 Facebook followers, and just 2 of the artists from their lineup have a combined reach of about 1.2 million people. So if we're able to, and their total artist reach of their full lineup was probably about 4 million people. So that's the attainable market of a festival when you think about how much reach the artists that you're booking actually have, but there's no way to really capitalise on that. So we're trying to find ways where the record labels, the artists, the promoters can actually collaborate on content that is worth paying for to the consumer and deposit that in the archive, because that's the only way in which they can experience that content, through the archive. And that will enable a festival or a doof that might only be able to get 500 people, but the total reach that they might have is several million, to potentially generate serious revenue by people just paying $1 a year towards some content. So if we were to take a look at this 4 million people and just assume that only 10% of that audience spent $5 in that 1 year, maybe it's on a digital album or maybe it's on a virtual reality experience, that festival could now generate about $2 million a year in just passive revenue without actually having to do anything. So something like that would really be amazing for the event industry if we're actually able to tap into these larger audiences. And I'm running out of time, so I'll just quickly contextualise what that would actually mean by showing you, giving you the example of Woodstock. So we've, one of the projects that we've been working on is a digital virtual reality version of Woodstock. And the way that we've done that is we've taken the elevation data of the actual dairy farm, we've brought that into a 3D environment and we've modelled it, and then we've recreated everything that you see in here from archival content. So you would be able to navigate your way around Woodstock, click a button, pop up a gallery, and be able to see all of the content that was available during that day. But the main thing is that had this technology existed back in those days, and they had produced hundreds of hours of, maybe 360 content, or there's a whole bunch of other stuff that they could sell directly through the experience, then they could have been generating revenue for 48 years. And if you think about the brand that Woodstock has managed to maintain over that period, then they potentially could have generated billions of dollars over the lifetime of this experience. So we're talking about an event that lost $9 million, but if it was archived, could generate billions of dollars over its lifetime. Obviously, not every event is going to be a Woodstock, but you just never know. So we were hoping to have that experience ready today, but we didn't get a chance. So yeah, it really is, we're at a stage where if we can create really significant revenue streams through these archives, then we could potentially start to reduce the price of actual tickets. It would also mean that artists wouldn't charge so much either, because now they've got a revenue stream, a royalty stream from these archives that everybody is sharing. So potentially, if we can get this model working really well, it's not impossible to think that there might be a scenario where a Rainbow Serpent could be totally free, and they're actually making most of their money from the archive. And now I just want to talk about the impact of events, because this is what I'm most passionate about. And in 1985, Live Aid done 2 events. Across those 2 events, got 165,000 people and raised about $245 million to fund like poverty alleviation. But more recently, Global Citizen did 1 event, got 80,000 people, and $6.1 billion was committed through corporate sponsors, government, NGOs. So the skills of festival producers is it can create huge amounts of impact if we so chose to head down that direction. And that's exactly what we've done. So we've started to work with an NGO called Vihara Foundation on a project called Rock Against Poverty. And this mission is only possible with the capabilities of Metavents, because it allows us to remotely manage all of these different events across the world really successfully. And we're targeting high-risk countries that have a really high probability of a natural disaster within a particular time frame, and we're attempting to raise $1 billion annually to fund natural disaster mitigation projects and poverty alleviation projects. So even though that $1 billion might sound really significant, that isn't through public donors necessarily. It's in the same way that Global Citizen was able to raise $6.1 billion for just 1 event. So we're attempting to raise $1 billion across 50 events in 25 high-risk countries where it is in their interest to invest in disaster mitigation projects, because between 2003 and 2013, natural disasters cost the global economy $1.5 trillion and impacted 2 billion people and took the lives of 1 million people. So the culture around mitigating against disasters is not necessarily popular. You know, people are not recognizing the importance of actually investing much smaller amounts of money in mitigating natural disasters, which end up costing billions more. And this is where I want to incorporate the esports component, because one of the things that we're really fascinated about is how can we use virtual reality simulation in a meaningful way by leveraging the characteristics of gamers to not stop until they win. And so one of the strategies for the Rock Against Poverty model is to actually create a serious gaming league where we're using real-time data and real-world information about things like natural disasters and poverty alleviation projects, and be able to create these challenges where there's a prize pool, where we will essentially say, well, if you can solve this particular problem, then you'll get $1 million. But because they're using Metavents, which is all connected to the real world and it's all using real world information, then how they actually solve that problem can be implemented into the real world. So not only would they win a prize for coming up with that, with the best strategy, but they would also be able to be responsible for what they did in the simulation having real world impact. And that's something that we see would really transform the games industry. If gamers knew that just by playing the games that they loved, they could actually make the world a better place, then it works really well for them. But also, if you're a government and you're trying to solve some of your infrastructure projects or poverty alleviation projects, you may spend millions and millions of dollars in getting a consultancy to write a report, which might take 12 months, and then by the time it's actually looked at, it's completely redundant. If we were to use simulation that's using real-time information, then we're able to get the most accurate and crowdsourced variations of how something can be done. So not one proposal, but maybe thousands of different ways in which to achieve a particular outcome. And that's something that could be done really cheaply simply by tapping into that characteristic of gamers. So I'll wrap up now just by saying that if you're in the event scene and you're producing events, that you are actually in a business, and a lot of event organisers don't realise that. They just start doing events because they love doing it, but
they are essentially an entrepreneur, and they are forming a bit of a startup, and they need to recognize the value of the skills that they're actually learning when they're putting on an event. Think about it, like if you are putting on a festival, you're sheltering thousands of people, you're feeding them, you're giving them water, giving them power, you're giving them entertainment, and you've got to essentially set up a mini civilization and then pack it down again. So these are all really, really valuable skills that event producers don't recognize that just how valuable they are. And the other thing about about this environment from a council or government point of view, festivals are a great opportunity to actually test ideas and utilize the insights that can come from making events much more efficient or more profitable. They would all be transferable insights into broader urban development or town planning. So there's no reason why a council couldn't start collaborating with a festival and actually start to drive their economic development and support that festival in just reducing some of those barriers and working a lot more closer with them to make them more successful. So the next steps is that we've been looking to work with regional councils and local councils to pilot Metavents. We need festivals to test with, and we've been quite successful in getting some of those relationships. So Beloke Shire Council, which is the one that denied Matreya's permit, is actually the first regional council to agree to pilot this platform with Esoteric Festival. And we've also got Pleasure Garden, which is in Catani Gardens in St Kilda, and that's run by Parachute International, who also do rainbow surfing, and Glastonbury, and about 14 other festivals. So we've got an amazing crew of people that are going to be able to test this capability. And the other one is that we're really looking to create more of these future music industry events, because most people in the event industry are broke. They can't afford to go out to, events that would be really valuable to them. So we need to deliver these free events, and we need to educate them and raise the level of professionalism within our industry, because it desperately needs people who know what they're doing. Otherwise, any of the technology that we introduce is just not going to be used properly, because people don't realise that they have to have a certain base level of professionalism in order to make the most of it. So what I'm going to ask you today is that stay in touch with us, because this is going to be turned into this virtual reality experience. And if you've made a connection here today, or you've gained a really significant piece of insight that you can actually implement either into your project or into your business, let us know about it, because we want to bring that information here into this archive. And I mentioned that we're looking for the 3 regional and 3 metropolitan councils to do more pilots with. And we're also seeking partners and sponsors for Rock Against Poverty. So we're looking to do a Rock Against Poverty on a small scale as soon as we can, really, just to test Metavents as a planning solution. And we're looking to do that here in Melbourne. So yeah, I'll just leave it there, and I'll open it up to questions. Yes.
Firstly, brilliant vision and commitment. I think it's fantastic. Really love the concept of it. As a grown-up old school ranger,
Yeah.
but I really love this technology. I love the idea of it. From your point of view, obviously being yourself in technology, what kind of timescale can you see this being consumed by the masses with your headsets being?
Yeah, so the festivals that we're working with recognise that, they're mainly driven by generating new revenue streams. They just cannot depend on ticket sales anymore, because there's this opportunity with an archive to generate passive revenue streams. They can, where there's exclusivity. So if they collaborate with, say, an artist like Justin Bieber, who's got 99 million Twitter followers. So if he was to do a tour in Australia and that tour was planned using Metavents, then in the contract it would be that you have to produce X sorts of content, which is free, X sort of content, which we can charge $25 for, and we'll all revenue share on that. but we need to enable the punters to try VR, which means that that every event that we work with will be giving out Google Cardboard type headsets, because you can factor it into the cost of the ticket. It's only like $5 a unit or something like that, completely inexpensive. The punter can pay for it. But what's happening is they're being exposed to the technology that they ordinarily wouldn't have. And when you're looking at a Glastonbury or a St Kilda festival, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in a single weekend that would get a VR headset. And they have artists that they've gone there to see that they're passionate about. And if there's content within that archive where they can feel like they're within reaching distance of their hero, then that may be something that they'd be worth paying for. So part of the pilot that we're establishing at the moment is just trying to figure out what is commercially viable, like what is the content that punters would actually pay $1 for or $25 for. We don't know yet, but we definitely have some ideas about things that would be quite significant. And I'll give you one example. At Pleasure Garden, there was an artist, Dub FX, and he was doing he was doing a set. He called his pregnant girlfriend up onto the stage to do a little dance while he was performing. And then after the event, after the set, he proposed to her. And there's a few thousand people there, and they all love Dub FX. And but this moment is the sort of magic and value that could be captured at an event that could potentially generate revenue at some point. Because all of a sudden there's some story there around an artist who has a huge following, whether that was captured in 360 video or not, or even if it was just 2D and just deposited within the 3D archive. There are people that would just love to relive that experience and say, I was there when this happened. And then you think about the child that was actually in that belly when that happened. In 18 years' time, they might be able to put on a headset and go back in time and see their dad, propose to the mum. And this is the power of these archives, is this ability to travel back in time to moments that are really, really special. And that's why I brought up that Earthcore experience, because that changed my life, and that moment, if I could relive that again, that would just be something that I would do forever. And these are the types of values and stories that we can't quantify the value of that to somebody. But if we can capture as much as we can, then there's bound to be different things at different times that is going to be worth something to somebody. And so in terms of time frame, we're going to be working with a lot of festivals over this summer season and next summer season in particularly. And so we're looking at being able to inject millions of headsets into the event industry, simply just by giving it to people on their as part of their condition of entry. And if we do a good job with the content and people are like, yes, there's great content in the archive, I want to get a better headset, then we may see uptake in actual mobile VR. And then by the time people are sort of matured with the concept of VR, then they might be compelled to invest in a tethered headset or something like that. So I'm really seeing the next 12 months as being the best indicators of how much of an appetite the punters have for this type of technology. So I'll keep you posted.
Any more questions?
Yes.
Hey, Joel, Tina.
Hey, yes.
Have you done any work with Paula Bad from Earth Frequency Festival?
No, but we're going to be working with Trent from Elements Festival.
I'm booking flights for Elements Festival.
All right.
Now. And just because I've used Paula Bad's system Convoc. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
Yes.
It sort of sounds like it's the beta version of what you created, which is...
Yeah, because that was the software that we were aware that a lot of the festival organisers were using.
Yeah, because the website is the back end.
Yeah.
So everyone fills out an application on the website and then that gets translated to and that halved my workload when I started using that system.
Yeah, so there's a lot of existing softwares that we plan to integrate in with if they exist already. For example,
we don't necessarily want to have this database of these 3D modeled venues, and that's why, speaking with Caroline, she's got a platform where people are going to be able to, it's like the Airbnb for private land.
Yeah, awesome.
So it's platforms like that have a capability that we can just plug into via an API and say, let's change a few things about your platform so that it can support some 3D objects, and then that's just another value add to their platforms. In addition to the event, sort of workforce platforms like, a Sidekicker and things like that. That's where we recruit a lot of those people from, these existing databases, and if even we have to sort of play nice with other ticketing systems as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got to sort of integrate with a lot of things that already exist.
So in terms of, because I obviously do artist management,
Yeah.
so from the booking right through till they leave, I'm going to be working with Esoteric Festival as well.
Yeah.
Am I going to need training?
Oh no, because it's still early days. So what we're
Yeah.
doing is we're just identifying where in the planning process this visual capability is going to be most relevant, and
Yeah.
then we've got to work with those event organisers and the different managers and stakeholders and find out what are the features that they actually need. So everything's really malleable right now.
Yeah.
It's all about engaging partners before we've written any code.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Good luck. I
Okay.
look forward to having some say in it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'll just bring the mic.
Thank you, Joel. That slide you posted with the global citizens, 6.1 billion in one event.
Yes.
Was that real revenue they put?
No, it's kind of like in kind contributions.
Oh.
So it's not donation. It's in money. So I think Google donated, contributed about $500,000 worth of computers to regional towns, and a lot of that was going straight into projects like creating better hygiene infrastructure to remove open defecation in India and things like that. So it was lots of money being provided as some sort of either technology or infrastructure or something like that. So that wasn't public donations, it was actual things.
Yeah, I also liked the part where you showed the slide with the festival that went bust.
Yes.
And they're getting sued for $100 million.
Yeah, Fire Festival.
It kind of linked it to what you're doing here as a different dimension in terms of what do you call it? Disaster relief.
Yes.
You can actually use this tool to model disaster camps and program all the things you need. I saw like,
Exactly.
things like fencing, security, food,
Yeah.
water. I mean,
Yes.
have you approached any government entities to show them?
World Vision, Save the Children, and Red Cross all want to pilot it as a response planning capability. So this is all part of what we'll be talking about when we start to test this with Rock Against Poverty. It's first modelling the project that needs funds in the simulation first, and using the gamers to figure out the best way to actually execute that, the cheapest way, the most affordable way, and then only when we figure out, this is going to be the best way to actually do this particular project, then it gets assigned that budget, So as those funds are being raised, it's not like they're just, we're just asking for donations. It's being able to show this is the project that your funds would be going into. So you can imagine the corporate sponsor, if Google was to go, if we were to give you $200,000, then it would actually build that hospital and these, 6 houses. And then within the simulation, the archive, they could potentially take people on a tour of the impact that Google was able to create with their donation. So it's being able to use visualization, use virtual reality as a way to not only simulate projects that need funding, to make it easier for people to fund those, but also making that a way in which those brands can really demonstrate how they're creating impact in the world, because they can stick their brand on, this village that they just funded, But I think, I've gone way over time. So
That's fine, Joel. We'll let you off.
But so thank you everybody for coming. Keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks ever so much for coming today. Thanks to the tech team at the back, Brad and everybody. Thanks to Joel for helping organise it, and all the supporters of it, from VicGov to Startup Vic and everybody else who's helped make this possible. And NAB.
VRCC, who's actually organised all the expo stuff. So make sure you go out and check out some of those exhibitors.
Yeah. They're all there waiting for you. So get up straight. And then the evening session starts at 7:15 in about an hour. But go and have a look at what's out there by the VRCC. And thanks ever so much.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks.